Good morning. I'm the Reverend Tony Lorenzen, and I'm very glad you can be with us for this Sunday service here online with the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society and the Unitarian Universalist Church in Meriden. As we approach Thanksgiving, we'll be taking a look at the difficult history in our national myth around Thanksgiving and how we might be truly able to celebrate a joyful Thanksgiving and be honest about our past. We'll note that yesterday was the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and we will remember that in part of the service. And we will celebrate cornbread and cider ceremony. And if you have cornbread and cider at home, I invite you to get that ready. And I want to send a big, big thank you out to everyone who made cornbread or provided cider so we could have people drive by and stop and pick it up yesterday so you could have cornbread and cider provided by other members of the congregation to add a little depth to today's ceremony. Being Unitarian Universalists, we begin our service by lighting the symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice. I invite you to join me with the words of the chalice lighting that will be on your screen. We light this flame in joyful gratitude for the simple abundance of our lives, that we have enough to eat, a place to live, and family, friends, and a community of faith to share our lives.
We gather together in joyful thanksgiving, acclaiming creation whose bounty we share, both sorrow and gladness we find now in our living. We sing a hymn of praise to the life that we bear. We gather together to join in the journey, confirming, committing our passage to be our true affirmation in joy and tribulation, when bound to human care and hope, then we are free.
Let's celebrate the cornbread and cider ceremony together. We have before us cider and cornbread in anticipation of the Thanksgiving holiday to come. These things are also symbolic of the historic encounter between the native inhabitants of this country and European settlers from England, upon which we built our Thanksgiving national myth. We readily acknowledge now that the traditional story handed down about the first Thanksgiving for generations of the Pilgrims and the native peoples of Massachusetts enjoying a friendly harvest gathering together is, well, full of a lot of inaccuracy, to say the least. We readily acknowledge that what Europeans and their American descendants did to the native inhabitants of this country amounts to genocide. We know the trouble of the past, and yet there is still something right about celebrating harvest and Thanksgiving and family and friends and community. And it is this we emphasize as our Thanksgiving celebrations march into the future. Throughout history, people all over the world have celebrated harvest festivals, and various religious traditions have marked harvest festivals as well. The Jewish tradition has holidays originally based on harvest festivals. Native traditions and pagan traditions and earth-centered traditions have harvest festivals. And we have a long history of Christian hymns in that tradition celebrating harvest in that time of year. Today, our Thanksgiving harvest meal will be simple cornbread and cider. And we choose cornbread and cider because they are representative of the native inhabitants and the Europeans who encountered each other in North America. Corn was a staple of indigenous diets throughout the Americas. And apples, originally a fruit native to what is now Kazakhstan, made it to Europe a long time ago and were unknown in the Americas, just as corn was unknown in Europe. So as these two elements were brought together, they've enjoyed a history together, the way the two peoples have enjoyed a history together, a history that's been marked by theft and death and injustices. But today we're going to celebrate our being able to inherit both sides of that tradition, doing our best to acknowledge the real history of the past, and in so doing be able to create a more wonderful and beautiful future where we realize the contributions of all people to country and culture and community that we share. And so we gather, imperfect inheritors, each of us, of an imperfect history. But we are part of the long march of humanity that has recognized having a supportive and loving community and enough to eat and drink, and family and friends, and shelter from the cold are things we are right to be very grateful for. And so we give thanks. We give thanks for enough to eat and the work we do to create justice and a better future and a place to live and family and friends with whom to share our lives. I invite you now to take a moment and just call to mind among you and who's gathered with you where you are, what you're grateful for. And now let's get ready to have our cornbread and cider. This table is now made ready, the table we share in person and through the internet. It's the table of all who answer the call of love. It is a table of sharing with the world's poor. It is the table of communion with the earth. And I invite you to come to this table, you who have much faith, and you who have none, and you who would like to have more. I invite you who have been to tables like this often, and you who have never been to a table such as this, or to table with us. I invite you who have strived and succeeded, and you who have strived and failed. For there is a creative, sustaining, and transforming power in this universe at the heart of all that is. May we feel its presence in the corn and cider and in the presence of each other's company. One with the earth, one with the spirit of life, one with each other. We share this cornbread and cider meal as a living symbol of the covenanted community we are and the beloved community we work to create. Amen. Let us say grace. For all those without bread and cider and community and love, we wish for them these things. For those of us with cornbread and cider and community and family and friends, may we always hunger for peace and justice. Enjoy. Like so many people before us, we have used the ancient symbol of food and drink to express gratitude and to celebrate with one another. Let us acknowledge that divine spark and power that dwells in each and every one of us and in the world around us and reaches beyond the limits of our human understanding. Let us now pledge ourselves to the days ahead and commit to build a better world where we neither oppress nor hurt each other. May ours be a holy will, a sacred will, to live in peace. And may we eventually prove that working for peace and working for the beloved community is what will in the end be the salvation of the world. Amen. Please join in singing where you are at home the wonderful soft hymn, There Is a Love. all know the Thanksgiving story we inherited is not really what happened. It was not as simple as friendly natives helping starving white people fleeing religious persecution by teaching them to fish and teaching them to plant beans and corn and squash together. And then having a successful harvest, the native peoples and the white folks from England sat down to a feast on the fourth Thursday in November. We all know that's not exactly what happened, that there's a lot left out and not included. We celebrate Thanksgiving this year during a pandemic made more severe and deadly because half our citizens don't take it seriously and refuse to adhere to some basic public health precautions because of some twisted ideology about personal freedom where they believe people have the right to do whatever the heck one wants no matter how much it hurts others. We celebrate Thanksgiving this year in a country not only divided over an individual's responsibility to follow public health guidelines, but divided over what is real and what is not, what is fake and what is genuine. We are divided over who deserves to be treated like an equal human being with dignity and rights that everyone else has. We are divided over belief in religion and God. We are divided over so much. It is as if we are trying to live in two different realities at the same time. We are even divided over the value of trying to engage those who see the world differently from us in serious conversation and whether it's worth the effort or not. All of us are trapped in some type of cross-dimensional vortex where what's obvious to some is not so or irrational to others. Now, it's one thing to disagree over whether pumpkin pie or sweet potato pie is better. It's sweet potato pie, by the way. Not even close. It's another thing entirely to disagree over whether or not gay people can be married, or police can shoot to kill black people at will, or women should be able to have control of their own bodies and reproductive choices. As James Baldwin told us, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and my right to exist. And the reality is many of our political and cultural disagreements boil down to just this exact point. Some of us refuse to deal in the denial of others' humanity and right to exist, and some of us are quite comfortable denying humanity and the right to exist to anyone else who is not exactly just like us. So, how do we heal such division? Healing our present is deeply and intimately intertwined with healing our past. Healing our past is difficult because cultures and countries are very much like individuals. The story we know to be our own personal story is not always the same as what actually happened to us. We all live in a reality where the details of our personal history are shaped by trauma, pain, joy, self-worth, and emotional and physical health. The self we have constructed is shaped by what events we choose to remember and what importance we give them. We're all the hero in a story about ourselves, and we all diminish our negatives and inflate our positives. We get anxious, angry, depressed, frustrated, guilty, and sometimes even traumatized when confronted with the realities of our own past and how they may not match the way we see them or remember them. Each of us has a personal mythos we've created about who we are and how we became that person. Nations and cultures are the same, and it's why healing our history is so difficult. I grew up Catholic. Now I am not only a Unitarian Universalist, but a Unitarian Universalist minister. I still can't shake the Catholicism I grew up with. As much as I disagree with Catholic teaching on human sexuality, the role of women in the church and society, and many other things, my spirituality still feels most at home with ritual, candle, incense, and I think Jesus is a pretty good guy, although not any more of a god than you or me. And his teaching fits my UU world and still grounds my life. I even taught theology in a Catholic high school for nearly a decade, and there are still parts of Catholic theology I find useful, even as I disagree with Catholic teaching and practice in other areas. For example, I still see the world in my existence sacramentally, that I encounter the divine in the people, places, and events of my life. I believe human beings are made in the image likeness of the divine, and that human lives are ends in themselves and not a means to an end. such as a cog of production in a capitalist economy or a tool, a living weapon of war and aggression. As the reality of existence made its imprint on me, I gave up parts of the Catholic Judeo-Christian worldview in which I was raised, the parts that didn't square with the realities of science or my lived experience. I no longer believed Jesus was born of a virgin, or wise astrologers followed a star to a manger, or that bodies get reanimated and resurrected from the dead. And yet, there's a part of me that every Christmas and every Easter wishes those stories to be literally true. Most of us grew up Americans. We were taught the American myth, the way Catholics were taught the Catholic myth. English Puritans, the Pilgrims, fled religious persecution and established a new life in a new world. Democracy broke away from the tyranny of kings, Bunker Hill, Paul Revere, Fort Ticonderoga, Washington crossing the Delaware, the surrender at Yorktown, the Constitution, Lewis and Clark, Manifest Destiny, the Star-Spangled Banner, the War of 1812, Gettysburg, Appomattox, the Great Melting Pot, the Statue of Liberty, the Gilded Age, saving the world for democracy in 2 world wars, Camelot, the Cold War, saving the world from communism in Korea and Vietnam, putting a man on the moon. I know the history that we remember as mythos leaves out the evils of slavery and Jim Crow. I know it leaves out what the Constitution itself calls, quote, bloodthirsty Indian savages. And I know it leaves out women. I know it leaves out much and many people. And yet every 4th of July there's a part of me, if I'm being really honest, that wants it all to be literally true. That wants to wave the red, white, and blue and sing America the Beautiful and this land is your land. And even though I know it's not the real history but the mythos of American civic religion that's being celebrated, there's a part of me that wishes it was all okay, the way we tell it. It's myth. And that's really the core of the issue, isn't it? Just like each religious tradition has mythos, so too does civic religion. Faith traditions have creation myths, myths about their prophets, and so too does American civic religion. Our creation myths center on the Mayflower Compact and the Revolution and the Constitution, and we have our prophets from Miles Standish to George Washington to Thomas Jefferson to Lincoln, Kennedy, and Reagan. We celebrate them. They become heroes. We ignore their human flaws. There's always an internal struggle in the soul when you give up your myths, for it means giving up identity and the things that ground you in your reality. It means giving up part of the story of who you are and how you got here for a different story about who you are and how you got here. And this is a large part of why America is divided in the way it is. Unitarian Universalists, by and large, now 9 out of 10 of us, are people who have given up our old religious mythos and undertaken the brave and courageous journey to create a new one. Liberals and political progressives in our country are by and large people who have given up the old civic religious mythos for the brave, courageous journey to create a new one. Being both a Unitarian Universalist and a political liberal, I sometimes forget why it's so hard for some people to change and to change our country and its culture. When we ask others to see it our way, it can be easy to forget what a struggle that is going to be for so many people. We're asking people to admit that they've been lied to, that the story they've been told is not what actually happened, or at best, only part of what actually happened. And therefore, because of this, they are not who they thought they were. I look around our country now and I see people who actually seem to live in a different world, as if they want to change reality. And I am sure that when some people are asked to consider the imperfections of America and the falsehoods and inaccuracies of our American civic mythos, they think others want to literally change the reality of America. Well, maybe we do. Isn't it time? I don't want to throw away the American myth, but I don't want it to be forever based on inaccurate and incomplete versions of our actual history, or for us to continue to take that mythos literally. Too many people have suffered and died because of the lies and falsehoods in our American civic mythology. Just as individuals need to learn about their blind spots and accept their imperfections in order to be able to accept themselves as they are, and who they really are is lovable and acceptable and worthy of dignity and respect, so too does our country need to accept its imperfections and admit to the wrongs we've done and make amends for them. As the years go by now, more and more people do not know the history of the Holocaust. Why should this surprise us? As the years rolled by, more and more people ignored the genocide of the Native American peoples. This past Friday was the Transgender Day of Remembrance. It's a day to remember all the transgender people who were killed simply because they are transgender, because someone thought who they are is a crime punishable by death. I want our country to admit its history is a history of making a crime punishable by death to be a certain type of person. To be indigenous, black, gay, trans, Muslim, Jew, Irish, Arab. When we admit this, we can heal our history. It's possible to do it. Germany teaches the reality about its history when it teaches the Holocaust. We can do the same about our native peoples, genocide, and enslaved Africans. We will be better for it. When I was a little boy, my dad taught me about the Native American Day of Mourning celebrated by the Wampanoag on a hill overlooking Plymouth, Massachusetts. I was a little boy, and this day was only a few years old in the mid-70s. I was lucky. I grew up with parents who taught my brother and I the reality of history, even when we were not taught it in school. So Thanksgiving arrives again this week. I don't want to celebrate an American civic religious myth. I do not want a day of mourning. Maybe if we create a true national holiday recognizing the true history of indigenous peoples here, we could celebrate Thanksgiving without needing it to be a story that isn't true. Maybe a National Indigenous Peoples Day devoted to owning the dark side of our history and apologizing and making amends for it would allow us to create a new Thanksgiving, less tied to the not quite accurate Pilgrim and Indian story, and more about just being grateful for what we have, and what we can have includes a more accurate version of the history of our peoples. I want to be doing our part in this effort today. The land upon which our congregations in Woodbury and Meriden, Connecticut make their home was not empty wilderness when Europeans first arrived in Connecticut. From now on, the opening of our services online and in person will acknowledge this as a step on the road to justice. The Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society acknowledges that our congregation occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Paugussett and Mohegan peoples. The Unitarian Universalist Church in Meriden acknowledges that our congregation occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Quinnipiac and Wappinger peoples. In offering this land acknowledgement, we commit to learning more about these hosts and neighbors, and we affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experience. And giving thanks is good. Gratitude is a powerful spiritual practice. And I don't want to give up Thanksgiving Day or rewrite history. I want to give thanks, and I want to acknowledge the actual history, what really happened. Among the things for which I want to give thanks is our Unitarian Universalist faith. Ours is a faith that allows me to appreciate our Puritan ancestors and the spirit of democracy in the Mayflower Compact, and at the same time recognize the peoples who wrote that compact, dismissed as inferior human beings the Native American peoples they encountered and later exterminated. Ours is a faith that allows me to revel in respect for the interdependent web of existence so woven into the Native American worldview and so alien to the Puritan. Ours is a faith that allows me to build a new Thanksgiving holiday in my free and responsible search for truth and meaning, not merely a secular Thanksgiving holiday, but a genuinely religious Thanksgiving founded in my liberal faith that shines light on the left out of our history, celebrates the bounty of the natural world, and appreciates all the blessings I enjoy that much of the world goes without. A faith that encourages me to recommit myself to work for a more just and equitable world in the present day, so that the history our descendants read will shine with beauty that comes from the genuine blessings of the light of truth. Happy Thanksgiving. We hold in our hearts this week Adele Taylor, whose house was damaged in storms recently, and Randy Heath, who is battling an injury, and Peg Fitzpatrick, as she reconnects more fully to the church after being ill and not being able to be active for a while. We continue to hold in our hearts Judith Francis's brother, Father Dan, Trish Stewart and her mom, who is in hospice care, and Richard Galt and his granddaughter. His granddaughter has had COVID, and all who have died of COVID-19, all who are sick, and all those who care for the sick. Spirit of life, we give thanks for each other, for family, friends, our communities of faith. We give thanks for all those who baked cornbread and provided cider. We give thanks for the native peoples of this land and their commitment to this country, in spite of their ignoble treatment by the colonizers and their descendants. We are grateful for an even better understanding of the real history of our country, so that going forward we may tell a more honest account to our children, and through owning the difficult parts of our national past, may create a more inclusive and equitable future for everyone. We are grateful for our transgender siblings. May an increasing awareness, understanding, and compassion lead to a day when we give thanks that no transgender people are murdered just for being who they are. We are grateful for the democratic process and the guardians of democracy and free and fair elections. We are grateful for an incoming administration that understands science, and we hope for a quick end to our pandemic. We are grateful for whatever privileges life has afforded us, and we promise to use them to help correct injustice, oppression, and make reparations to those who have been trampled and erased by history. In gratitude for all these blessings and all those we have left unnamed this morning, we give thanks in the name of everything glorious and good. Amen. Please join in singing our closing hymn, We'll Build a Land. The words will be on the screen.
We'll build a land where we find our
We've come to the end of our service, so we extinguish our chalice flame, but we keep that light with us in our hearts wherever we go. May that light remind us to be grateful for all the simple blessings that we do have. I hope you and everyone you love have a safe, healthy, and wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Go in peace, holy ones. We'll see you next week.